On a quiet Monday morning, 3 alien warships broke through the clouds over Fort Bragg, and their commander laughed at what his scanners showed him. Just soldiers, just rifles. Just men in green uniforms drinking coffee. He had no idea he had just picked the one base on Earth he should have left alone. Before we step into this journey, hit that like button, subscribe if you are new, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from tonight. Now, let's go back to the moment it all started. Fort Bragg woke up like it did every Monday. Trucks rolled down gravel roads. Boots hit pavement in steady rhythm. Steam rose off cups of black coffee in the mess hall. Nobody on that base expected the sky to change before lunch. Colonel Robert Hayes had been in charge of the garrison for 6 years. He was 51 years old, broad-shouldered, with gray creeping into his short hair and a voice that could stop a room without him raising it once. He was standing outside headquarters going over a supply report when the birds went quiet. That was the first sign. Dead silence. No wind, no birds, no hum of distant traffic. Then the sky tore open. 3 shapes dropped out of the clouds, dark and angular, moving with a kind of silence that felt wrong for something that large. They hovered above the training fields, casting shadows that swallowed entire companies of soldiers standing in formation. Master Sergeant Dale Whitman was mid-sentence, correcting a recruit's rifle stance when he looked up and simply said, "Well, that's new." Radios across the base lit up at once. Every channel filled with the same confused, overlapping voices. Colonel Hayes didn't wait for the confusion to sort itself out. He grabbed his radio and gave the only order that made sense. "All units hold position. Nobody fires unless fired upon." "Let's see what we're dealing with." The 3 ships settled low over the open field near the airborne training area, kicking up dust in slow, deliberate waves. A ramp opened on the lead vessel. Steam poured out into the morning air. Then came the first alien soldier. He stood roughly 7 feet tall, covered in dark plated armor that looked more grown than built. His skin, where it showed at the joints, had a faint gray sheen. He carried a weapon that hummed faintly like it was breathing. Behind him came dozens more, forming disciplined ranks with mechanical precision. Corporal Sam Reeves, crouched behind a supply truck with his rifle ready, muttered to the private beside him, "They walk like they've never lost a fight in their lives." Private Danny Holt, chewing gum like his life depended on it, replied, "Yeah, well, they've never met us." The alien commander stepped forward last. He wore armor with more ornamentation than the rest, gold trim tracing down his chest plate, and he studied the base with open amusement. His voice, translated through some device built into his collar, rang out across the field. "This world's defenders," he said, tone dripping with mockery. "Rifles and dirt roads." "We expected more of a fight." Colonel Hayes stepped forward, hands empty, posture calm. "I'm Colonel Robert Hayes. This is Fort Bragg. You're standing on United States Army property." The alien commander tilted his head, clearly unfamiliar with the word army, but not unfamiliar with the tone of a man who wasn't afraid. "I am General Threl Vask of the Korathi Dominion," he announced. "This world has been selected for resource acquisition. Your kind will comply or be removed." Behind Hayes, a low murmur ran through the ranks of soldiers. Not fear, something closer to disbelief mixed with irritation. Sergeant First Class Ethan Cole leaned toward Whitman and whispered, "Did he just say remove us? From Fort Bragg?" Whitman didn't blink. "Son, he has no idea what he just walked into." Hayes kept his tone level, giving nothing away. "You picked one hell of a Monday to land here, General." Vask laughed, a dry mechanical sound. "Location was randomized. Your world's coordinates were simply the closest viable landing zone." "Random," Hayes repeated quietly. Then, almost to himself, of course it was random, because Fort Bragg wasn't just any patch of land. It was home to some of the most trained, most stubborn, most relentlessly capable soldiers on the entire planet. Airborne units, special operations. Communications specialists who could reroute an entire battlefield network before breakfast. Logistics teams who could move an army across an ocean in days. And thousands of soldiers who had spent years training for exactly one thing, never backing down, no matter what stood in front of them. General Vask raised one clawed hand, signaling his troops to spread out and begin scanning the perimeter. His soldiers moved with total confidence, treating the base like an afterthought, a formality before conquest. That confidence was about to become a problem. Private Wyatt Cross, watching from the tree line with a pair of binoculars, spoke quietly into his radio. "Command, be advised. Their point squad just walked past our ammunition supply depot without stopping to look inside." Colonel Hayes allowed himself the smallest trace of a smile. "Copy that, Cross. Let's keep it that way. Everyone hold. Let them think we're exactly what they expect us to be." Because right now Fort Bragg looked calm, organized, almost passive. But underneath that calm, radios were already buzzing with quiet, coordinated movement. Positions were shifting. Communications teams were pulling data. Airborne units were staging without a single visible change on the surface. General Vask stood in the middle of the field, arms behind his back, admiring his own ships like a man who had already won. He had no idea that 300 meters behind him, an entire operations center was already building a plan built on decades of hard lessons, real combat experience. And the one thing these aliens had clearly never accounted for. They had landed in the wrong yard, and Colonel Hayes was about to make sure they learned exactly why. Inside the base operations center, the mood was tense but controlled. Maps and readouts filled the room with quiet, static energy. Colonel Hayes stood at the center table, flanked by his senior staff, watching updates roll in from every corner of the base. "Talk to me," Hayes said. "What are we looking at?" Major Lisa Grant, head of base intelligence, pointed to the readout in front of her. 3 landing craft, sir. Troop numbers estimate somewhere around 400, spread across the training fields and the edge of the airborne range. Their weapons emit an energy signature we've never logged before, but preliminary data suggests standard kinetic shielding on their armor, nothing that stops a well-placed round completely. "Just slows it, so they can be hurt," Hayes said. "Yes, sir, just not easily." Sergeant First Class Ethan Cole leaned over the table. "Sir, with respect, half our guys already want to know why we're not moving yet." Hayes didn't look up from the map. "Because the second we open fire, this becomes a war neither side can walk back from. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we commit to that." Outside, the alien soldiers continued their slow sweep of the base perimeter, confident and unhurried. General Vask walked the open field like a man inspecting property he already owned, occasionally pausing to examine a fence post or a parked vehicle with mild curiosity. Near the motor pool, Corporal Sam Reeves and Private Danny Holt were tucked behind a row of parked trucks, watching 2 alien soldiers examine a Humvee like it was some kind of ancient artifact. "They're actually touching it," Holt whispered, "like they've never seen a truck before." "Maybe they haven't," Reeves said. "Maybe out there in space, everybody just floats everywhere." One of the alien soldiers reached out and pressed a clawed hand against the Humvee's hood, testing the metal. The vehicle's alarm went off immediately, a sharp, blaring horn that echoed across the open field. Both aliens jumped back so fast one of them tripped over his own weapon. From behind the trucks, Holt covered his mouth to keep from laughing out loud. Reeves elbowed him hard. "Do not," Reeves whispered, "let them hear you laughing at their tactical retreat from a car alarm." Back in operations, that exact moment showed up on the base's internal reporting feed. And even Colonel Hayes allowed himself a brief, tight smile before turning back to business. "Grant, what's the situation with their ships?" "Still hovering, sir. No sign of additional reinforcements incoming yet. If they called for backup, we haven't detected the signal." "Good. That buys us time." Hayes turned to Whitman. "Dale, I want 2 things. First, I want every non-combat personnel moved to secure buildings, quiet and controlled, no panic. Second, I want our best marksmen positioned along the tree line out of sight, and I want eyes on every single one of their weak points." Whitman nodded once. "Already moving, sir." Outside, General Vask returned to the center of the field, addressing Colonel Hayes again through the translation device. "Your world grows more curious by the minute," Vask said. "Your soldiers hide behind vehicles instead of forming ranks. Is this some form of primitive strategy?" Hayes stepped forward again, calm as ever. "It's called cover, General. You might want to look into it." Vask's jaw tightened slightly, the closest thing to irritation his alien expression allowed. "You stall for time, Colonel. It will not save you." "Maybe," Hayes said. "Or maybe you're about to learn why nobody invades an active military installation without doing their homework first." Vask laughed again, that same dry mechanical sound. Though this time there was a flicker of something else behind it. Uncertainty, perhaps, though he would never admit it. Meanwhile, near the eastern fence line, Sergeant Cole was crouched with two of his men, watching a group of alien soldiers attempt to interface with the base's outer communication tower. One of them placed a device against the metal frame, and sparks immediately shot out, sending all three aliens stumbling backward. "They're trying to hack our comms," Cole whispered into his radio. "And it's fighting back." In operations, Major Grant almost laughed. "Our systems weren't built with universal alien compatibility in mind, sir." "Looks like they're finding that out the hard way." Hayes allowed himself one more small smile before his expression hardened again. "Let's make sure that's the only thing that surprises them today." He turned to the room, every eye on him. "Listen up. These things are strong, disciplined, and confident. That confidence is the only weakness we've seen so far. They think this is going to be easy. We are going to prove them wrong, but we do this smart. No wild shots, no unnecessary losses. We use everything we have, our training, our terrain, our people." Outside, unnoticed by General Vask, 3 Black Hawk helicopters were quietly powering up in a hangar half a mile away, their rotors just beginning to turn. And far across the base, deep in a communications building the aliens hadn't yet reached, a young specialist was already typing furiously, sending a message no one on that field could have predicted. A message headed straight for the Pentagon, because Fort Bragg wasn't planning to fight this war alone for long. Inside the communications building, Specialist Casey Miller sat hunched over her terminal, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. She was 24 years old, sharp and calm under pressure in a way that made older soldiers trust her instincts without question. "Colonel," she said into her headset, "message is away." Pentagon confirmed receipt. They're already looping in Joint Chiefs and requesting a live status update every 10 minutes. Colonel Hayes exhaled slowly. "Good work, Miller. Keep that line open no matter what happens out there." "Yes, sir." Outside, tension on the field was rising. General Vask had grown tired of waiting for what he considered a proper response to his ultimatum. He turned to his second-in-command, a broad-shouldered alien officer named Commander Threck, and gave a short, sharp order. "Advance the second wave. Let them see real numbers." More alien soldiers poured out from the landing ships, forming tighter, more aggressive lines. Their weapons hummed louder now, a collective vibration that seemed to shake the ground beneath their boots. Colonel Hayes watched the buildup from a covered position near the command post, jaw tight but expression unreadable. "They're pushing," Whitman said beside him. "Trying to force our hand. Then we don't give them the reaction they want," Hayes replied. "Hold every position. Nobody fires first." Near the tree line, Sergeant Cole adjusted his rifle scope, watching the alien ranks grow. Beside him, a young private named Ryan Walsh shifted nervously. "Sarge, there's a lot of them now." Cole didn't look away from his scope. "There's a lot of us too, Walsh. They just haven't figured that part out yet." General Vask raised his voice again, addressing the entire base as though delivering a verdict. "You have 5 minutes to lower your weapons and surrender this territory. After that, we begin removal by force." Colonel Hayes stepped forward one more time, standing tall in the open field despite the obvious danger. "General, let me explain something about this place." His voice carried clearly across the silence. "This isn't just a base, this is Fort Bragg. Home to more combat-trained soldiers than most countries have in their entire military. Every man and woman standing here has trained for years for exactly this kind of moment. You didn't just land in someone's backyard. You landed in the one place on this planet built to make sure moments like this don't end well for people who threaten it." Vask's mechanical laugh returned, though weaker this time. "Confidence will not stop energy weapons, Colonel." "No," Hayes agreed, "but planning will." At that exact moment, the quiet hum of rotors grew louder in the distance. General Vask turned his head toward the sound, confusion crossing his alien features for the first time. 3 Black Hawk helicopters rose over the tree line, flying low and fast, flanking the alien position from 2 different directions. Behind them, disciplined formations of soldiers who had been quietly repositioning during the standoff began emerging from cover, weapons ready but still not firing. Colonel, Vask said, voice sharp now, what is this? This, Hayes said calmly, is us showing you exactly how prepared we are. Before things get worse for everyone. For the first time since landing, doubt flickered across General Vask's expression. His soldiers, disciplined as they were, exchanged uncertain glances as the sound of engines and rotors surrounded them from multiple directions at once. Commander Threck leaned toward Vask, voice low. General, our scans show additional units mobilizing from structures we hadn't detected before. Vask's confidence cracked slightly, though he masked it quickly. Numbers mean nothing against superior technology. Maybe, Hayes said, overhearing the exchange through the open channel. But numbers backed by training, terrain, and time to prepare mean everything. He raised one hand, a signal only his own soldiers understood. Every rifle on the field shifted almost imperceptibly, aligning perfectly with predetermined targets, still holding fire, still waiting. General Vask's 5-minute deadline ticked closer, the tension stretching tighter with every passing second. Somewhere above, the Black Hawks circled once, engines roaring louder, forcing the alien ranks to look skyward instead of forward. And in that single distracted moment, Colonel Hayes gave the only order that mattered. "Hold until my mark," he said quietly into his radio. Not 1 second before, because General Vask had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, standing right in front of him, hidden behind calm words and quiet movement, was an entire base that had spent the last 20 minutes turning his overwhelming confidence into the very thing that was about to destroy his advantage completely. The countdown reached its final seconds, and Fort Bragg was ready. The 5-minute deadline expired with a silence so heavy it felt like the entire base was holding its breath. General Vask raised one hand, ready to give the order to advance. "Your time has run out, Colonel. Compliance was the easier choice." Colonel Hayes didn't flinch. "We already made our choice, General." "You just haven't seen it yet." Vask's hand dropped. The alien front line surged forward, weapons raised, their formation moving with terrifying discipline. But the moment they crossed the open field toward the base perimeter, the ground beneath them lit up with a controlled response that had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. From the tree line, Sergeant Cole gave the order through his headset. Fire! Coordinated rifle fire erupted from multiple positions at once, striking the alien front line from angles they hadn't accounted for. Their armor absorbed some of the impact, but not all of it. Soldiers staggered, several dropped entirely, and for the first time since landing, the alien ranks broke formation out of pure instinct. Overhead, the Black Hawks swept in low, forcing a second wave of alien soldiers to scatter toward the open field. Directly into the sightlines of soldiers who had been waiting in perfect position the entire time. "They're not holding formation," Whitman reported from his position near the command post. "They weren't ready for return fire this coordinated." Colonel Hayes moved quickly but calmly toward a secondary command point, watching the battlefield unfold exactly as planned. Though far from finished, "Keep the pressure controlled. We're not here to wipe them out. We're here to make them leave." Near the motor pool, Corporal Reeves and Private Holt found themselves face to face with 2 alien soldiers who had broken off from the main formation, clearly disoriented by the sudden resistance. "Cover," Reeves shouted, pulling Holt behind an armored vehicle just as an energy blast tore through the space they had been standing in seconds earlier. Holt fired back around the edge of the vehicle, striking one alien soldier square in the chest plate. The soldier staggered, but didn't fall, armor absorbing most of the impact. "Aim for the joints," Reeves shouted. "Their armor's weakest where it bends." Holt adjusted his aim and fired again, this time catching the alien soldier at the shoulder joint. The soldier dropped his weapon, clutching the wound, before Reeves closed the distance and disarmed him completely. Across the field, General Vask watched his forces falter with growing disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. "This world had no advanced defenses in our scans." Commander Threck, standing beside him, looked equally shaken. "General, their coordination suggests extensive prior training. This is not primitive resistance." "No," Vask said slowly, realization creeping into his voice. "This is something else entirely." Colonel Hayes' voice carried clearly across the open comm channel, calm despite the chaos surrounding him. "General Vask, you still have a choice. Withdraw your forces now, and this ends without further losses on either side. Vask hesitated, watching his soldiers pull back instinctively from positions they had expected to hold with ease. Around him, the battlefield had transformed from an easy conquest into a controlled, methodical defense that refused to break no matter how much pressure his forces applied. Near the eastern perimeter, Sergeant Cole and his squad advanced carefully, pushing a group of alien soldiers back toward their landing ships without a single unnecessary shot fired. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, exactly as they had trained for years to execute. "They're falling back toward their ships," Cole reported. No signs of reinforcement incoming. In the command post, Major Grant confirmed the same. "Sir, their remaining forces are consolidating. No additional ships detected in orbit." "Whatever backup they might have called, it isn't here yet." Colonel Hayes allowed himself a brief moment of calculation before responding. "Then we press just enough to make sure they understand this fight isn't winnable, but we don't push them into desperation. Controlled pressure only." General Vask, watching his forces retreat further, finally turned to face Colonel Hayes directly across the battlefield, voice tight with barely restrained frustration. "You call this defense," Vask said. "This is not the behavior of a primitive world." "No," Hayes replied evenly. "It's the behavior of soldiers who train their entire lives for exactly this kind of moment, whether they ever expected to face it or not." Vask's grip tightened around his weapon. Torn between the order to press forward and the growing realization that continuing this fight might cost him more than his mission was worth. Somewhere behind him, one of his officers shouted a warning about incoming movement from the northern tree line, a fresh wave of soldiers Colonel Hayes had kept in reserve the entire time. And as General Vask turned to assess this new threat, the battlefield shifted once again, tightening around his forces from every direction at once. The fight was far from over. But for the first time since landing, General Vask understood exactly how badly he had underestimated the people standing in front of him. The reserve unit moved in fast and disciplined, closing the gap around the alien position from the north exactly as Colonel Hayes had planned from the very first minute of the standoff. General Vask, watching his forces caught between two fronts, finally understood the trap he had walked into hours earlier without realizing it. "Pull back to the ships," Vask ordered, his voice sharp now, stripped of the earlier mockery. "Full retreat," Commander Threk hesitated. "General, retreat now signals weakness to the Dominion Council. Staying here signals death," Vask snapped. "Move." Alien soldiers began falling back in controlled but urgent formation, covering each other as they retreated toward the landing ships still hovering at the edge of the field. Colonel Hayes watched the retreat begin, giving one final order through his radio. "Let them go. No pursuit past the tree line." "We wanted them gone, not destroyed." Near the motor pool, Reeves and Holt watched the retreating soldiers pass close by, weapons still raised but not firing. "They're actually leaving," Holt said, almost in disbelief. "Told you," Reeves replied. "Nobody wins a fight against people who already know every inch of their own backyard." General Vask reached the ramp of his lead ship. Pausing for one final look back at the base that had dismantled his entire operation in under an hour. Colonel Hayes stood in the open field, unmoving, watching him leave with the same calm expression he'd carried since the ships first appeared. "This is not finished, Colonel," Vask called out, voice carrying across the distance one last time. "Maybe not," Hayes replied. "But if you come back, you already know what's waiting for you." Vask disappeared into his ship without another word. Moments later, all three vessels lifted off the field, engines roaring as they climbed back into the sky and vanished into the clouds as quickly as they had arrived. Silence returned to Fort Bragg, but this time it carried a different weight, the quiet exhaustion of soldiers who had just faced something none of them had ever trained specifically for. And won anyway. Colonel Hayes lowered his radio slowly, allowing himself one long breath before turning back toward his command staff. "Status report," he said. "I want numbers on wounded damage assessments and anything unusual left behind on that field." Major Grant moved quickly to comply, already coordinating teams across the base. Whitman approached Hayes directly, expression unreadable but respectful. Sir, for what it's worth, that was about as clean as a first-contact firefight could go. Hayes allowed a tired but genuine smile. Nobody trains for aliens showing up on a Monday, Dale. We just trained for chaos in general. Turns out that covers more than we thought. Across the field, soldiers slowly began regrouping, checking on each other, securing the perimeter, and processing what had just happened in real time. Specialist Miller's voice crackled over the radio from the communications building. Colonel, Pentagon is requesting a full briefing immediately. They also want to know if you need additional support inbound. Hayes considered that for a moment before responding. Tell them the situation is contained for now, but we'll need a full debrief team out here as soon as possible. And Miller, good work keeping that line open the whole time. Thank you, sir. As the base slowly shifted from combat readiness back toward controlled recovery. Whispers began spreading among the soldiers, some in disbelief, some already turning the events of the day into stories they knew they'd be telling for years. Near the tree line, Sergeant Cole gathered his squad, checking each soldier for injuries before allowing himself to process what had just happened. Anybody want to explain to me how we just fought off an alien invasion before lunch? Walsh asked, still catching his breath. Cole shook his head slowly. Don't overthink it, Walsh. Just remember every bit of training you've ever had matters, even when the enemy looks like something out of a movie. Far above the base, the alien ships had already vanished from sight, leaving behind scorched patches of grass, a few pieces of abandoned equipment, and one very shaken Dominion general who now understood exactly why this particular stretch of land had never been an easy target, even by accident. Colonel Hayes stood alone for a moment in the center of the field, looking up at the empty sky where the ships had disappeared. He knew this wasn't truly over. A retreat wasn't the same as a surrender, and somewhere out there, General Vask would be reporting back to a much larger power, one that now had real data on exactly what humanity was capable of. But for today, Fort Bragg had held its ground. And as Hayes turned back toward his waiting staff, already preparing for the long process of reports, briefings, and whatever came next, one thought settled clearly in his mind. Whatever came back through that sky in the future, they would be ready for it too. By nightfall, Fort Bragg looked almost normal again, except for the scorched patches of grass near the training fields and the steady stream of vehicles moving equipment and personnel in careful, deliberate patterns. Word of what happened had already spread far beyond the base, but the full picture remained locked behind classified briefings and careful, controlled statements. Inside the command building, Colonel Hayes sat across from a secure video briefing with senior officials from the Pentagon, walking them through every detail of the encounter with the same calm precision he had used throughout the entire event. To summarize, Hayes said, hostile forces landed with clear intent to claim this location. Standard defensive protocols, combined with rapid tactical repositioning, were enough to convince them withdrawal was the safer option. We sustained minor injuries, no fatalities, and minimal structural damage. A senior official on the other end leaned forward. Colonel, based on your report, it sounds like their technology significantly outmatched conventional expectations. Yet your forces still managed to force a full retreat. They underestimated us, Hayes said simply. They assumed advanced technology alone would guarantee an easy victory. They didn't account for trained soldiers who understood terrain, coordination, and patience better than any scanner could measure. The briefing continued for another hour, covering logistics, potential future threats, and recommendations for base-wide readiness updates. By the time it ended, Hayes finally allowed himself a moment to step outside and breathe in the cool evening air. Near the mess hall, soldiers gathered in small groups, quietly processing the day's events over late dinners. Corporal Reeves and Private Holt sat near the end of one table, still replaying the moment the car alarm sent two alien soldiers stumbling backward. I'm telling you, Holt said, grinning despite his exhaustion, that's going in my report exactly like it happened. Reeves shook his head, smiling. Nobody's going to believe an alien invasion got interrupted by a Humvee alarm. Doesn't matter if they believe it, Holt replied. It happened. A few tables over, Sergeant Cole sat with his squad, going over small details of the engagement with the same careful focus he brought to every debrief. though even he allowed a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. "You did good today, Walsh," Cole said. "First real contact and you held your position the whole time." Walsh nodded, still processing everything. "Sarge, do you think they're coming back?" Cole considered the question honestly before answering. "Maybe, probably, but if they do, we'll be ready the same way we were ready today." That's the job. Across the base, Specialist Miller remained in the communications building long after her shift technically ended, helping coordinate the flow of information between Fort Bragg and higher command. She had spent the entire encounter as the quiet, steady link between chaos on the ground and decision-makers hundreds of miles away. And she felt the weight of that responsibility settle now that the adrenaline had faded. Master Sergeant Whitman found her there, offering a rare compliment. "You kept that line open the whole time, Miller." "Command's already flagging your performance for commendation." Miller allowed herself a tired smile. "Just doing the job, Sergeant. That's usually when people do it best," Whitman replied. Later that night, Colonel Hayes walked the perimeter of the base alone, taking in the quiet after a day that had tested every ounce of training, discipline, and composure his soldiers possessed. He paused near the edge of the training field where General Vask had once stood with such absolute confidence, mocking a world he assumed would fall without resistance. Hayes looked up at the clear night sky, stars scattered peacefully above him, giving no hint of the danger that had appeared there just hours earlier. He thought about General Vask's final words before retreating, the promise that this wasn't finished. Hayes didn't doubt that for a second. Whatever power stood behind that Dominion Council would eventually receive a full report, detailing exactly how badly their expectations had been shattered by a single military installation on a planet they assumed would offer no real resistance. But if they came back, Hayes knew exactly what they would find waiting for them. Not a base caught off guard. Not soldiers underestimating the threat in front of them. A garrison that had already proven, in the span of a single Monday morning, that assumptions about easy conquest could collapse the moment they met real training, real coordination, and real people who refused to back down. As he made his way back toward the command building, radios crackled quietly around him, base personnel settling into the long process of after-action reports, equipment checks, and the slow return to normal routine. Somewhere far above the clouds, General Vask's ships continued their journey back toward wherever they had come from, carrying data that would eventually reshape how an entire alien civilization viewed the planet they had once dismissed as primitive. And down below, Fort Bragg stood exactly as it always had, quiet, steady, and ready, waiting for whatever came next. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to drop a comment letting me know what part hit hardest for you. Share this video with someone who loves a good underdog story. And subscribe if you want to see what happens the next time something decides to test the wrong soldiers on the wrong Monday morning. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.